Hi guys, welcome everybody to our event Breaking Into Marketing, and thank you all for joining. I'm just going to start off by running through our agenda today. So I'll start off by giving you guys a background into GradGurus and who the team is and why we do what we do. I'll then move on to introducing our two speakers today, who's Shivani and Saif. They'll be giving you a brief background into their journey into marketing and hopefully some tips and tricks into breaking into marketing for yourselves. And following that, we'll have a Q&A where you'll be able to answer any questions that you might have, either things that have been said during the speeches or any questions that you've got in general in marketing, and even things that haven't been actually covered. So any questions that you do have, if you don't mind saving them, putting them in the chat function, and we'll be able to cover them at the end of the session. But if I could please request that as either myself or the speakers are speaking, that we don't interrupt anybody with any questions on the spot. So if we could just move to the slide. Thank you. So we are a group of students who struggled to get into our relative industries, sought out mentors who really helped us to get into the world of work, and we came together as a group of individuals who are now in graduate positions. And we decided that we should help out the next generation of students get into the world of work. And we decided to form GradGurus. So our main mission is to take university students who are talented, who are able to get into various different industries, and to help them along the process until they've got a graduate position. If I could go on to the next slide, please. Just an introduction to everybody on the team. So some slightly cringy photos that you can probably see, but myself starting, my name is Ahmad Al-Astewani. I spent 5 years working at KPMG in audit, and I graduated from Manchester University in 2016. We then have Ali Ahmed, who is our founder. He works for JP Morgan in internal audit. He's had previous experience in audit, external audit at EY. We then have Hudayfa Jamar, who is working in software engineering at the moment. Ibra Ahmed, who's also got experience at EY and who now works in internal audit at EMIS. Takir Hussain, who is the entrepreneur in the group. Layla Hafar and Mohammed Hafar, who is working in financial technology at the minute and who has previous experience at Accenture. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So we've got two main speakers today, and I don't want to take too much time in introducing either of them because they know a lot more about marketing than I do. I'm steeped in the world of finance. So our first speaker today is going to be Shivani Jessica. She works for Socialize, which is a media agency which was founded in 2010. And I'll take no more of your time and pass you on to Shivani. Shivani, if you could just switch on your camera, please, and unmute yourself, and pass over to you.
Hiya, guys. Okay, so I'm going to do a really short intro. My name is Shivani Jessica Kulshrestha. You can call me Shiv. I know that name's already like 15 letters too long. I'm a strategist. I work at Socialize. It is part of the bigger global network. Oh, you can stay on this slide. Sorry, I'm not clicking. It's part of the bigger global agency called We Are Social. If you're familiar with marketing, you would have seen one of the reports. They put out one every year. And our entire purpose is to connect people and brands in meaningful ways. I'm going to tell you a little bit. Here, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey. So I'm Indian. I grew up in Dubai. I moved to London and I went to King's for university. I did a BSc in business management. While I was there, I did a bunch of different things. Every summer I was working. I did the Barclays 3-day internship my first year. My second year, I worked at Google with their EMEA global marketing department for 3 months. I was a student brand ambassador for EY for the King's campus. Did that for 3 years in general, London. Then I moved back to Dubai. I really wanted to work in a creative agency. That was like always my dream. So came back, started working at Socialize, started off as an intern. Within a month, I was fast-tracked to a senior account executive. 2 years later, I was an account manager. And then 3 years later, 4 years later, I was a strategist. I helped found the strategy department within my company. This is going to sound so braggy, but last year I was part of Faces to Watch 30 Under 30 for Campaign Middle East. But it's a thing. And some of the clients that I work on, some of the names you might recognize, some of them you might not if you're not really familiar with Dubai. Some of the global ones are Riot Games. I work with Adidas, Sony, Bioderma, Oppo, which is a fun brand. General Mills, which includes things like Bugles, Old El Paso, Betty Crocker. I'm looking over at my roommate to be like Betty Crocker. And also things like Expo 2020 Dubai, which is a really massive government account, and things like that. So that's a little bit of my repertoire. I'm super happy for you guys to ask me any questions later on about how I even got into this space. It's a really interesting story. Next. Click. Yeah. Okay, good. I just wanted to give you guys some context about, I say I work for Socialize / We Are Social, and I work for an agency. What does that even mean? Because I didn't really know when I was a graduate. I just knew it wasn't working for the actual brand, but working for the brand in a different capacity. So We're Social is a globally socially led creative network. We have offices all over the world, 15 of them, around nearly 1,000 people working for us. The number grows every day. I work in little Dubai office. Over here, we take care of the Middle East. That goes everything from the Gulf, so UAE, Saudi Arabia, etc., all the way to North Africa. We look after Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, and we also do some of Southeast Asia. So we look after India, I want to say Bangladesh. I don't know why I hesitated there, but yes. But yeah, so we're pretty much everywhere. Click. Sorry. Okay, cool. So what does We Are Social do? I think the concept of an agency, unless you're in it, is a bit abstract. So I just wanted to put in a really neat slide as to what working in an agency, like what kind of departments you could work in. Our whole purpose is to create ideas powered by an understanding of people's social behavior. A lot of people think that if you work in a social media agency, all you care about is how people act on Instagram. That's not the case, especially if you work as a strategist. You care more about how people socially act out in the real world, how they connect with each other, whether it happens through their phone or not. So it's about people first before platforms, and then seeing how you can leverage that idea or insight into creating really cool content that works. There are a bunch of different departments you can work for in an agency. There's research and insight, there's strategy, which is where I sit. There's editorial, there's creative and creative text. These are your posts. This could be your filters and things like that. There's production, if you're somebody who's into videography and things like that. These are the people who would shoot all of those things. There's media and distribution. This is something I didn't know until after I got into an agency, had no clue what this was while I was a graduate. Media and distribution are the people who are in charge of media buying. So they're the people who take your post and put money behind it and turn it into an ad and advertise it on Facebook, Google, Snapchat, etc. A lot of really interesting stuff that happens on there. And then also measurement. So if you're in charge of reporting and things like that, that tends to be in a department that works between research and insight and media and distribution. You tend to have a hybrid role over there. If you're like me, you have I don't know, a finger in every single one of these pies. It's the best part of being a strategist. You get to feed into all of these different teams. And yeah, it's a little overview of what we do. Next, I wanted to give you a little video about the exciting world of marketing. This is all the stuff that we do at We Are Social. This video is our hype reel, our show reel for Socialize, our Middle Eastern office. Play. Well, anyway, I promise you that video is very cool. You can definitely check it out on our YouTube channel if you look up Socialize Agency. It's got some really high beat sort of situation behind it. It's really nice. Next. Okay, so what do I do? My job is essentially to strategically plan advertising campaigns. That sounds like a bunch of jargon. So what does that actually mean? I care about what drives consumer action first. So depending on where you work in an agency, a lot of the time, what you care a lot about is, for example, if you work in client servicing, you care a lot about what does the client want. That's something that is not as important to me as to, besides what the actual consumers, the person who's watching my content, what did they care about, and what kind of relationship do they have with a brand or a product? That's where I sort of sit, and that's kind of my role. I then plan how brands can make that knowledge work for them. Yeah, so I care consumer first. How do I do that? This is an age-old question as to, oh, someone said we can go back to the video. I'm so easily distracted by little chat rooms, by the way. Sorry. Oh, okay, you said we can go back to it after. Great, got it. So how do I do that? I think this is a question I get a lot, even from people who are just joining strategies or as account planners. How do I do that? I tend to do it through working with the research and insight departments. We have analysts that work there. I also talk to client servicing. I also work very closely with the creative department, and I also just generally talk to consumers. But yeah. Why do I love it? I think this is really important for something, especially if you're looking to enter marketing, for you to understand why, whoever's speaking to you on a panel, like why they do what they do. I've been a strategist for nearly 2 years now, and I can't imagine doing anything else. And it's mainly because social media, especially for social media, it's just such a key way to connect with a consumer. And when you work as a strategist, you get to sort of be privy to all sorts of weird facts about people and how they behave online. And here are like a few of my favorite ones. Like, did you know that on average, people check their phone 80 times a day? That's insane. That's an insane amount of screen time. They spend up to like 3 to 4 hours on social. If you're in the Middle East, we spend around 5. You use social to connect in different ways, depending on what age group you're part of. If you're young, you tend to use it to connect with new and exciting people. These could be influencers, these could be friends. During the pandemic, oh yeah, this is like another fun fact, if you were in Saudi, you made a lot of your friends on through Snapchat and things like that, friends that you normally would never have spoken to in high school. You actually would have made friends with them online because you guys were all in lockdown. No, it's not you guys, but so that's one of my favorite facts. Older people, they tend to connect with people that they know, which is the traditional way that people use social media. I love the fact that people follow brands and influencers that they like on social. That's such a strange thing to do. Like if you like a brand, you'll actually like see what they're doing. And 1 in 3 people actually like keep up with online bloggers to see like when they're releasing content, whether that's on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok. Another thing that I really like is how passive we are when it comes to creating content versus consuming. We might post 1 post a month, but we'll like up to 9 posts a month. If you're me, I tend to like literally every post I see. So that also changes. And the last thing that I really like is how we engage with influencers. If you're someone of my age, I'm like 1.5 times more likely to engage with a vlogger and the people sort of I admire on social versus Gen Z. But yeah, these are all like fun. I have like a million of these facts, and it's just so much fun to actually be able to see on the other end how your content can make impact or how people consume it. What kind of knowledge does a strategist have? I've boiled it down to 4 things. And these are the things that I would have wanted to know as a graduate. I'm super open to any other questions you guys might have. When I was not even a graduate in high school, I was really obsessed with psychology. I like wanted, even when I was like in year 10, I think I took it for GCSEs. I really wanted to know why people did things. So this is one of the jobs where you get to do that full time, where you need to you look at consumer behavior. For example, I'm working for a fashion brand right now, and I'm trying to understand why and when people buy clothes. That is a very simplified question, but it's a lot more complicated than that. Number 2, you get to learn a lot about platform knowledge. There's a lot of magic that goes into how all your social media platforms work and all the stuff that they're constantly coming up with. I know of really random things about how Instagram is testing stuff in India. So things like that really get me going. Number 3, I'm really passionate about social and tech, and that's the sort of branch of things that strategists get to know. You get to find out how AR works, how VR works, how people are using WhatsApp to pay, all sorts of tech and innovation that comes through social that way. And lastly, purchase journeys. I think a lot of strategists don't give this side of what we do credit. I really enjoy seeing from start to finish how you see an ad and then how it comes to light when you actually buy. So if it was the fashion brand, like what finally made you buy that crop top, which tends to be my number 1 purchase. And I think that's it. That's it on me, really. Just gave you a little nutshell on what I do.
Thank you so much.
Video quickly.
Okay, we're gonna give it a go.
So we had a bit of technical issues before, and I mean, I was the only one enjoying it, so I'll let everyone else enjoy it. There you go.
Thank you for that, Shivani. I thought it was several aspects of your talk were really interesting, particularly the importance of social media in today's advertising marketing world. And to be honest, how much goes into an agency, I didn't realize there'd be so much strategy and so much research. For me, a marketing agency is, involved in creating videos and, lots of creative type people. So I thought that was really, really interesting as well. I mean, just in terms of you were talking about VR and AR, I mean, in the next sort of 5 to 10 years, I mean, is that something we're going to start to see sort of slowly filter through, or do you still think that we're in the very early stages of that sort of technology?
I actually think so. If you'd asked me like 2 years ago, something as simple as Facebook started investing in something called Horizon, where they tried to build an AR virtual platform. And it kind of did well, it kind of didn't. But now, because of the pandemic, AR is really taking a sort of bigger hold or share in our lives. You'll see that there's something that we're exploring. We're going to put out a piece of research on it later, I think in a couple of months, about how we're creating virtual spaces. So a lot of brands have actually invested in creating permanent fixtures. Like the O2 Arena has actually created a little arena in Fortnite, and they're actually going to be hosting live shows. So you're going to be able to tap into that as a gamer. So they're investing in sort of AR and VR in different ways, where you don't necessarily just need the headset, but you can like tap into virtual spaces. So I think originally the idea was VR is going to come to you in sort of these goggles and things like that, but it's actually taken a slightly different form, which is quite exciting.
No, thank you. That's a really great answer. I think another question I have as someone who's not in marketing is, social media is clearly the place where everybody wants to be and where everybody's attention is on. And if I think about myself, the way I watch TV, for example, now I'm mainly watching Netflix, for example. Why is there so much money still pumped by the big brands into television advertising, do you think?
From my personal perspective, I think it is just a lack of flexibility. It's something that we, especially in the Middle East, we're, I'd say 10 years behind when it comes to marketing. Luckily, we're part of like a global agency that gives us, chance to see what the future should look like for our region. But it's just purely because people are used to a traditional way of advertising. They still believe that they need to have like the classic TVC, which is like the TV sort of commercial, and they'll even resize it for social. And it is just taken a lot of people, all of these older marketeers, to realize that people don't want HD classic ads. They want to see TikTokers doing really weird stuff on TikTok or Instagram or anything like that. It's less to do with what the audience wants, but sometimes a lot of it still happen, especially when you work in an agency. You'll find that you're more fighting what the client believes that they need versus what they actually need.
Yeah, I think, again, really interesting answer. For me, especially when I think about the finance industry, which I come from, or any other industry, I think change is a lot more slow than people make out. So you've probably heard recently about, people saying that we can all start working from home because we're in the pandemic. And already a lot of companies like Goldman Sachs have come out and said, no, we're going to have people work back in the office. And so I think change always takes a lot longer than people expect. I just have sort of one final question, really, which is, if you think about an industry which I'm in, for example, such as finance, it's a very, very standard route. You mentioned you did a 3 days internship at Barclays. It's a very fixed route. When you sort of got more creative pursuits like marketing, what are some of the, how does that path differ? How did you find it different applying for sort of roles in finance, for example, or very traditional type roles versus, right, okay, I want to now get a marketing position. How did your approach differ, your preparation for interviews, and how does that sort of look?
So I think there's like two parts to that question. My journey to marketing was not necessarily normal, but I think if you ask any person who's gotten into marketing, none of them have gone through like a normal path. There's no such thing. However, when I went more down the traditional route of Dubai kid going to London, wants to get a graduate placement, went and did all the internships, like applied for every single one, did all like the little tests and things like that, practiced all her interviews in front of her friends. They were sick of her and her flashcards. I did all the phone interviews, millions of rejections, and then one of the few sweet ones where they let me in, no idea why. So I did do all of that, and I would say, even though like some other industries have really set career paths, if you're somebody who has a natural affinity towards marketing, like for the fact that you've even joined this speaker panel, that means some part of you knows that this is something that's interesting to you. And what I would recommend to anybody who's interested in this sort of field is, don't just go for the big graduate placements. I think that was a mistake I made. Even like, let's say summer comes and all of your friends are in placements and you're not, it doesn't matter. Just work anywhere. The smaller the agency, the better, because you will have worked on everything. And by the end of, like, I'd say 6 months, you'd be a pro. Versus if you get to work in like a really big company for marketing, you tend to start off like a few steps back versus when you start small, when then by the end of it, you'll be launching websites at the ripe age of 22, like I did.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something I took from your talk, which was, again, how many, you said you've got your finger in a lot of pies, and that's a really huge advantage. It's always fantastic to say I work with, big brands such as Adidas and Nike. But again, when you're a really, really large agency, or really any sort of large player in an industry, you've always sort of got a very niche and specialized role. You can't sort of see everything around that. Versus, when you're a smaller sort of place, you've got your, like you said, your finger in a few pies. I'm sure, those are the questions off the top of my head, and I have the ability to ask them now. But, like I said, anyone who has any questions for Shivani, she sort of had a really engaging and interesting talk. Then again, you'll have an opportunity at the end with the Q&A. So I'm going to now pass on to...
May I just say one thing, just to come off your last question?
Of course,
the fact that when I say I recommend working at a small agency, even if it's part-time or something like that, after 3 months of working at Socialize, I was offered a job to be a brand manager. So doing the same thing I was doing at Socialize, but for Johnson & Johnson, and I turned it down to work at a tiny agency because I knew I would learn so much more at that age working for a small company versus a big conglomerate. And this is how far I've come in 5 years. So tried and tested, people, do it.
No, that's really interesting. I was working in KPMG for 5 years. It's got 16,000 employees in the UK, and many more thousands in the rest of the world. And I've planning to at least move into a company which has got 100 employees, because again, I'm sort of sick and tired of having a really specific and niche role, and I want to have access to all the different elements in the finance world. Obviously, I'm talking about, but I completely agree with you. So that's very interesting, and thank you for explaining that. So I'm now going to pass on to our next speaker, who potentially went down the more entrepreneurial route and started off two of his own startups. One is called Creed and Culture, and the other is called MIN. And again, I will pass on straight to him and allow him to delve into more detail. So Saif, if you can just unmute yourself, and I'll pass on to you. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for the intro. So I'm going to take a bit of a different route to Shivani. She's obviously quite hard to follow, but I'm going to take you back to why we first created our organization. And any organization, whether small or large, needs to solve a problem. So for us, in 2016, 2018 in particular, H&M launched a modest fashion line where they were aiming to capture the global Muslim fashion market that was worth over $226 billion. But then this happened. Comments like this started to appear. It's frustrating when brands release a modest collection that's nothing modest about it. Who told them random slits and plunging necklines were modest? And comments like this, H&M's modest range, I wouldn't buy anything. It's an Asian-inspired collection that wasn't actually modest. And then the final nail in the coffin for H&M was this video that was made by Dean in Tokyo. H&M's modest collection got me fuming. And she did a haul try on. It got nearly 1 million views. For H&M, within 6 months, they'd actually pulled their collection from their shop floors. For them, it led to them losing millions in inventory costs and hundreds of millions in sales. For them, also, what happened off the back of that, because of the loss of sales, the loss of inventory, they pulled the shop collection, and they actually lost their position as a leader within the modest space. It was a disaster, but they're not the only leading brand to have got things massively wrong. That's why we created Creed & Culture. It's a diversity and inclusion agency helping leading brands understand the power of difference. So who am I? I'm Saif, one of the co-founders. I'm an executive on board of directors of a digital publication called Muslim as well. I'm currently in Cyprus, so you start seeing me sweating. It's like nearly 40 degrees here, and the only good place that I have internet is outside. So just giving you a disclaimer, I was recently recognized as a top 50 thought leader in the influencer marketing space. I specialize in digital strategy, diversity, faith, and inclusion. But my real claim to fame is my blue piece of badge that I got when I was 8 for a poem. But it didn't all start the most conventional way. Even though we have Creed & Culture that helps leading brands simply just understand how faith and culture is an important thing when it comes to the decisions people make through our influencer marketing, digital strategy, consultancy, data and insights, and social media content creation. For us, that has to culminate in doing something. And the brands that we've worked with have helped us, and we've helped them raise over 5 million for charities as well, working with some huge organizations like the likes of Omnicom, Lidl, Google, and Anchor Butter. But it wasn't always that way. In fact, I was going to be this kid growing up, which was a guy who only had 3 choices because of his Asian parents, predominantly Asian, and being Muslim. I had these 3 options. I had to be a doctor, engineer, or be a lawyer. And I went down the law route. I studied law at Lancaster University, a great university. But then I recognized that something was missing. I did a placement with a QC barrister. And for me, there was a disconnect between what I was working towards and what I felt as a human being. And that's a problem when you're Asian, because like I said, I have Asian parents and they put a lot of money into my education. So I had to come up with a backup plan. And for me, my backup plan consisted of trying to find how I can align my passion and what I believe my purpose was. And we've probably all been through this. We probably all feel this, where you think, what am I actually doing with my life? And that forced me to do something, which was figure out a way how I can use my skills. So I was fairly entrepreneurial. At the age of 23, after leaving university, I worked for a corp as well. I started buying and selling things online. And today we use people called influencers with leading brands. Back then they weren't called that, but that's exactly how I built my brand. So the first component in understanding how you get to this stage, where for us being a leading agency, we worked with the NHS, helping them understand how they can connect with minority and ethnic groups across different diaspora. The most important step that you can do when it comes to deciding where you're going to go in your journey is start with the end goal in mind. So how would you do that when you're trying to figure out which role do I want to go into? What skills do I have? If you don't have the relevant experience to go into marketing, what you need to do very quickly is understand that you need to find out what you're passionate about. And the best way to find out what you're passionate about is simply just know what is it that you're interested in? What is it that you're successful at doing? And that often leads to you understanding how are you solving problems. So once you start with the end goal in mind, you can figure out what are the problems that you want to solve. So for us at Creed & Culture, we want to help leading brands understand people of different ethnicities, in particular, different faith backgrounds. That's a problem that we want to solve because we've seen what happened with H&M. That's exactly what you need to figure out. Once you figure out what problem that you're interested in solving, you'll understand that marketing, there's so many different areas that you can go into. So whether you're creative led, whether you're more data and insights focused and you like things in structure, marketing will most likely have an area for you, because once I started building my business, I realized that I had to do pretty much all of these things, where it was either understanding how a brand comes to life, understanding information on how to build email marketing threads and understand how I can actually capture data for our clients. There's an area for you when it comes to understanding how you can get into the marketing space, but you need to know the areas, and that's often down one particular route. Once you do that, you'll realize that if you go down the marketing route that I have, which is slightly more entrepreneurial, your days will make absolutely no sense. Like we're here in Cyprus on a planning for purpose, mission, vision retreat, where we're trying to figure out what are we working towards in the next 5 years. That are the most important problems that we want to solve. But we've ended up today doing sales, bit of marketing, speaking to clients. At the end of the day, obviously speaking to you guys. So going down the entrepreneurial route, if you don't like having a set schedule, this is probably perfect for you because you'll do lots of multiple things in that journey. So once you find out what you're passionate about, what problems you want to solve, understand the components of marketing, you'll then be able to understand there's three main areas that if you're going into marketing, you need to know about, and you want to figure out where do you fit. So there's the pre-stage of any marketing campaign or anything in the marketing space. So do you want to be involved in understanding what are the products that we want to sell? Why is it the best solution for our clients? How is it the best offer in a very competitive landscape? How do you build something that's scalable? Because the best products do that. So by you knowing which channel you want to go down, you understand, are you in the pre-stage? Or you might be someone who likes to actually pitch, or you might be someone who likes to do strategy like Shivani, and that's in the middle of winning the client. You've got to be able to break down their complex problem and find solutions that meet the needs that they have. So that's in the middle of a marketing journey. Or you might be someone who likes to be focused in the account-based marketing side of things, or just managing clients and being an account manager. And that's something that you can do once you've understood the route that you want to take. And that's very simple, and simply understanding the different components of marketing. From there, though, this is probably the most important thing that I've come across in my life when it comes to the business side of things, of just trying to connect the dots, because you're obviously you're in university right now and you're trying to figure out how to get into this space and what's important. Coming back to what I said earlier, you need to figure out very quickly what you're deeply passionate about. So I was 23 years old, more money than sense, and I could have stayed in the e-commerce business that I had, but it was lacking a component that I was passionate about, which was a deep sense of purpose of what I'm actually doing with my life and what am I giving to people. So you need to have that, because otherwise you'll get very quickly bored and you'll find that you're looking for other things to do. The second thing, when it comes to figuring out where you fit, what you need to do is understand what you can be the best in the world at. So maybe at 19, 20, I realized that I was fairly resourceful. I can bring together strategy. I can maybe lead when it comes to a really bad, lame style a few companies. So you need to understand what you can be the best at in this journey, because that will connect the passion and also connect the spirit that's needed to be successful. The third component in this is what will actually make you money. So if you've been entrepreneurial from a young age, I went to work for my dad when I was only 8 years old. I recognized that negotiation was something that allowed me to be successful to some level. So you need to figure out what you can make money from. And that might be writing, it might be, content creation, it might be, content reporting. You need to figure out what you think people have said you're good at. And even though you're at university, you will know some people would have said to you, this is what you're good at, or you're really good at this. So you should connect that with your passion, and then the understanding of what you can be the best in the world at, to simply figure out what you want to do when it comes to the marketing space. And then how should you go about applying for your dream job? Simply, what you should do first and foremost is you need to understand, do you want to go down the startup or established company route? So obviously we're a startup, and if any of you are looking to get into the space, we actually have internship programs running right now. And you need to decide, do I want to go work for a startup, like Shivani said, where you learn a lot, it's fast paced, but there aren't as many processes and structure. It's a bit more fluid, definitely more fun in my perspective. But you need to figure out, do you want to work somewhere where they have a route or a process, or they have a lot of creativity and freedom? You need to figure out if you want that. The second thing you need to know is you have to be a strategist if you go into the marketing. And I'm applauding Shivani after her talk, and I'm applauding it right now, because that's one thing I've realized throughout my life, that everyone needs a strategist. No one knows what they do, but everyone needs one. So what is a strategist? Fundamentally, someone that can break down a plan into actionable steps. And she's laughing, but it's true, right? No one has a clue
so
what you guys
accurate.
No one, and you charge a lot of money. You make a lot of money.
I know. I'm so scared someone's going to be like, yeah, but what do you actually do? And I'm going to be like, okay, listen, please.
No one knows. We're all trying to figure out. But yeah, so become a strategist, but also like Shivani, you've got to be comfortable selling. You've got to be comfortable being a people's person, because people buy from people. Fundamentally, any transaction is the exchange of energy. So when you're presenting, when it comes to building a relationship, you've got to be an incredible listener. My business partner is the best listener I know. You've got to be able to be receptive to feedback. I'm not great at that, but it's definitely needed. But one thing that's critical in that journey is knowing how to sell, because every moment of your life is a negotiation pretty much with people. So you've got to be able to do that at an excellent level. And the best way to do that is simply understand the components, which is what a strategist does. The third thing is get researching, understand the different agencies. There's 1,000,000,001 really successful agencies out there, which is crazy. You think with there being so much competition, how can anyone survive? But there's definitely a lot of success written there for you if you just simply know how to take the right approach. Do you want to go with like I said, a mainstream agency, or do you want to go down the route of working with a smaller bespoke organization? The final thing when it comes to connecting all of this, you need to know that there's 3 critical components of getting your dream job in this space. The first one is what my business partner is excellent at. He's just over here. So like, that's why I'm going to keep referring to him, is networking. You've got to be able to be comfortable networking. And today it might be difficult because you're all at home. We're all pretty much at home, even though I'm not really at home right now. But you need to get comfortable networking. And the best place to do that, or start off doing that, is LinkedIn. It needs to become your playground. The second thing that you need to do is build some sort of personal brand, because coming back to the point of people buying from people, in today's day and age, like Shivani has demonstrated, you need to quickly understand, how can people understand why they should trust you? And the best way to demonstrate that is to educate people, inspire them, entertain them, motivate them to do something. But you can only do that if you've built some sort of personal brand. And that's a very important step in understanding how you get to becoming a person that is living purpose, living their passion. The third thing that you need to be able to do is have the right mindset. And it might sound so cliche in 2021, where everyone's sending and sharing motivational videos, but breaking into this space at an excellent level, you've got to have a lot of luck for sure, but you've got to have the right mindset. And the mindset is a blend of 2 things. It's professional will. So just sticking at it, recognizing that there's going to be some tough days, but also personal humility. As you grow through the ladder, that corporate ladder, or even the marketing ladder, and start becoming more inspirational, more influential, you need to have the humility to recognize it's always a team first game. And what's the most important thing in all of this, connecting the journey? It's you have to be able to do what you love. If you're going to be committing 10, 20, 30 years of your life, you don't want to have any regret. And that's probably the reason why when I was 23, I look back on what I've done at university and thought, do I want to be 40 years old and look back and think, why did I go down this route of law? Don't have any regrets, and you can have no regrets by doing what you love. Even if you're paid a very little amount, you'd be surprised at how satisfying that can be by simply working on your passion. The second thing in 2021, the most important thing in this for me, in these 3 steps, is be purpose-led. There's plenty of organizations that will be out there that you can join, that you can try and contribute to. But if you don't feel that deep sense of connection to your work, that connection will, or that lack of connection will stop you from enjoying what you do. So quickly, even though you might be doing what you love, if you don't feel that it's purpose-led and leading somewhere, you won't actually stick it out. The third thing is when it comes to work, you have to recognize time is limited. So you have to feel accountable. Everything that you're doing, the people that you're trying to inspire, and the work that you're trying to contribute towards needs to make you think, am I doing my best work? Can I be doing anything better? And like I said earlier, even though I'm quite useless at getting feedback, there's a healthy process of recognizing you have to be accountable and understanding what you're contributing. So why is all this important? Because if you stick it out, not that we've had any success really, we're coming to our 5th year of business, even though we've worked with some amazing brands. This is where it actually all started out for us, in our bedrooms, in our sheds. And it demonstrates to you that there is a formula within all of this, even though, like I said, we've still got a lot to learn that can lead you to happiness, contentment through your work. And even though it might start off somewhere small, it can lead to somewhere big. And what do I mean by this? So this is a senior person from Gymshark in particular who reached out to us after coming across some of our content. You see Callum here, he reached out and we said, let's jump on a call. In the end, we've actually worked with the senior team members at Gymshark, helping them understand a community that they had never imagined connecting with before. And that's all because you started with the end goal in mind. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you so much for that, Saif. I think it's really, really interesting that We've had previous speakers such as Layla Hafar, who's now works with us, and other speakers in various industries, investment banking, finance, and they've all said the same thing, which is keep the end in mind. And again, you know, when you come from a different industry, you often think that the route to success is going to be maybe vastly different, and there are obviously different routes to success. But again, it's really interesting that all of our speakers in our past 6-7 months have all had very, very similar things to say. I also think that, you know, sort of going with your passion is really, really something really, really interesting. You know, I was in audit for 5 years and I wasn't really enjoying it, but I had a sort of a good career ahead of me, a good amount of money. And again, I'm sort of probably looking to take a step down, probably even a hit to my paycheck, just to do something which is sort of more interesting and more in line with what I want to do. I also think that marketing is often associated with being very creative. And maybe, you know, that can sort of get you by, but clearly both you and Shivani are very hardworking. I'm very inspired by the fact that you worked for your dad at 8. I think I was maybe working for the family business at like 13, 14, and I thought I was, you know, being taken advantage of. So I thought that was very interesting as well.
That's always...
I think networking is really, 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 really important. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not on any other social media, and that's how people contact me. And to be honest, I was helped out by a lot of people and mentors when I was applying back when I left university, and I'm very happy. And I don't think I've rejected anybody apart from some strange people I went to secondary school with on LinkedIn. And so again, you know, connect with myself, connect with our speakers, and connect with the rest of the GradGurus team. That's a really, really good starting point. So before we get on to the Q&A, I just want to briefly touch upon the Worshipful Company of Marketers. So this is an organization which is made up of members, both professionals, such as our speakers today, and also academics. And this sort of membership group, I guess, have the ability to have some sort of influence on marketing in practice and in education. So, for example, you know, they can potentially lobby governments on policy and different companies, etc. And they have actually opened themselves up for anybody who's attended today to become a member. So if you sort of apply and contact them, it's definitely a great thing to sort of put on your CV. You're leaving university, you don't really have any experience normally in work, and you know, you sort of, you know, you're looking to put anything on there, you know, head of this society, you know, played sport and whatever. So this is a really good opportunity to put something on your CV, and it doesn't really take a lot of effort. So again, you know, they are willing to take on members, and it's something for all of our attendees to look into. So if everybody who has any questions, can put their questions in the Q&A chat box. I'm going to run through them now and allow both Shivani and Saif to answer them. So I'm just going to open up the Q&A function. So the first question is for yourself, Shivani, and it says, how do you take advantage of social media to look more employable? And I assume that by social media, it includes both LinkedIn and potentially even other aspects of social media, such as Facebook and Instagram. And, you know, although the question's been put to Shivani, feel free, Saif, to sort of add in your thoughts afterwards.
I use social media in 2 ways. So number one, my LinkedIn is crammed full of different articles I've read. I tend to share things that I think would present myself as a thought leader. So if strategy or social media is something that you're interested in, or it's actually not industry specific, just make sure that you're reading. Also, when you share things, don't just share the link. Obviously, summarize a little bit, add your own take at the top. Ever since I started doing that, I see a lot more people connecting with me and actually messaging me. So that's one way to do it. The other thing I would say for your personal social media sort of activity, keep your profiles private. Because employers do look you up. I know a few people, I never had this issue, but I knew a few people in my agency who have found a bit of trouble with their uni photos. But what I would say, the other thing with your private social media channels is always be experimenting. So I think a lot of what people do is they don't really use their social media, even though they're really interested in social media, and that's super dangerous. You need to be understanding what the features are. You need to be understanding what's coming out, and that'll really give you a leg up. I don't really understand TikTok, but I'm constantly on TikTok. I could never do a dance for you, but I can tell you what's trending in the Middle East right now. But yeah.
Any thoughts, Saif?
No, I think Shivani definitely hit the nail on the head. I think one thing that I've learned is try to understand one platform really well and try to double down on that first before you try to do everything and you kind of feel overwhelmed and don't do anything. That's the first thing for me. And most of my time spent on LinkedIn because a lot of the decision makers that our companies come across are on LinkedIn. So if you're building business, that's probably the platform. Understand what the objective is when it comes to social media and what you're giving. That's really important as well. Second thing is how are you benefiting people? Like that's really important. So instead of just sharing anything and everything, know how you actually fit into their funnel. Like what are you bringing to them? How are you adding value? That's the second really important thing. And the third thing is once you figure out what's working, double down on it. Like you'll start to find themes. So for us, we might have themes where we share a slide deck or an image or an article or a story, and we just rotate when it comes to the content that we put out because those are the things that work. So once you start figuring out your theme, that's what you should do more of, and start to understand through the conversation, through the comments, what people want more when it comes to their journey as well, what they need. So they're my thoughts on that.
No, thank you. That's really, really interesting. I just like to point out that, both of our speakers have spoken about the importance of the personal brand. And to be honest, actions speak louder than words. I think, that the personal brand is clear on both ends to see. And I think particularly in marketing, if you can't market yourself, I don't think you've got a very good opportunity of working for a marketing company. So I think it's, again, both of our speakers can be role models for all of our attendees. There's two questions relating to diversity. So I think people are sort of questioning how difficult it is to get into the marketing world from different religious backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds. So again, I'll sort of, Seth, if you can give me your thoughts first, but definitely Shivani as well. You're obviously both from, diverse and ethnic backgrounds, and you've managed to sort of make your foray both on the entrepreneurial side and also into the just as an employee. So obviously you're shining examples of the fact that it's definitely not an obstacle. But again, I'll open up to is it an obstacle? And if it is, how do you overcome that? If not, how do you maybe overcome that insecurity of it being an obstacle?
So I think for us as an organization, we'd be naive to say it's not an obstacle for some people. But then what you have to understand is, do you want to be working for those organizations if it is presented as an obstacle? Like you need to make sure that the organization matches your values just as much as your values match them, because you have something to give. And if they can't respect that, if they can't value that, then they're not the right organization for you. So be principled, because it'll take you far in the long term. The second thing is once you start finding out which type of agency matters to you from a purpose angle, from a faith value, what you need to do is find out the right influencers, the key people, to build a rapport with them, because that's all part of the process. And that's why we keep coming back to, in particular myself, LinkedIn, because it's very easy to understand which person works for which company. And from the content that the company is sharing, from the content that the individual share, you'll be able to get a flavor of whether the organization's culture is right for you. That's the second step. And then when it comes to how to not be afraid of taking that leap because you're fearful or your background or culture prevent you from getting the right role, you need to recognize that everyone has fears, everyone has doubts, whether it be, like mental health issues right now when it comes to the world that we're living in, or other issues when it comes to the way that we work and the contribution that we want to give. But it doesn't mean that these are limiting factors for you to recognize that that shouldn't be a preventative measure. What you've come from, where you've been, there's a book called Unfair Advantage that I think a lot of people who are from different cultures and backgrounds should read, because you recognize that you have so much to give because of that, because of who you are, because of what you've been through. And when organizations recognize that, and if an organization does, then definitely they're the one for you, and definitely you recognize that that wasn't ever a limiting factor.
Yeah. Shivani?
That was so motivational. I just have to say, sorry. No, okay. So I honestly think Saif is way more sort of poised better to speak on this than I am, because one, I'm in the Middle East. Okay. So I kind of represent a lot of the key audience here. Also, speaking to his last point, my sort of where I'm from, my gender, my struggle with mental health issues or everything has actually been an advantage versus anything else. And the fact that I have, I'm of all different walks of life is actually proven to be something really useful, especially if you're in sort of the category of marketing that I'm in, which is strategy, where you have to be able to understand your different audiences. So it's never been a limiting factor, but I know for different people it will be. But yeah, so even I've also been very fortunate, exactly how Saif said, where my agency has always valued, everywhere I work has always valued how different and unique I am. I walk around with tattoos and crop tops, and like I say things like femme, in my meetings. My roommates are on the couch, like judging me, like, don't tell people that. So, I've always been really fortunate to work in places that appreciate people's differences. So I've never had that struggle. And I don't know if hopefully that's like a vote of confidence for anybody who's worried that might be an issue. I'm sure it will be, but there are examples where it might not be. So don't be afraid.
It reminds me of the Logitech, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, Logitech YouTube advert. Logitech YouTube advert, which I keep seeing on YouTube videos because I watch far too many, which is, we are the shakers and movers, and it shows all these creative looking people wearing interesting clothes. So that just struck a bell. But no, I think there was another question in the chat about, speaking about struggles that, potentially you've gone through. I think you've potentially already answered that, which is, if you go through struggles, whatever aspect of struggles that is, use it to your advantage. If you come from a certain ethnic and diverse background, use it to your advantage. Don't use it as an obstacle. Turn it into an advantage. We can see, Shivani, you've gone down the employee route. Saif has gone down the entrepreneurial route. But to be honest, judging from both of your personalities and your experience, I'm wrong here, but I feel if you both switch positions, you would still do very, very well. There's one question. There's two questions which I'm just going to answer quickly. One is about future events that we're going to hold. We generally hold an event once per month, and of course, our core expertise, myself and all the other members of GradGurus, is around finance. But we do obviously want to open that up, and hence we've done what has been I think a really interesting and fantastic event about marketing. But of course, we will have more finance-led events in the future. Another very interesting question, because I think it relates to networking, is about how we all know each other. And to be honest, we all met at university, and I think this is the importance of networking, which is that we met at university. We all went to different companies, Ernst & Young, KPMG, PwC, but we stayed in contact, and we've now come together to form GradGurus. So again, really pointing at the importance of networking. I think there's an interesting question, and it's less about how to get into the marketing space, but I think it's about marketing itself, which is, how has the pandemic affected buyer power? And again, I'm going to open up the question. I'll go to you, Shivani, first, and I'll go to Saif. I think it's a really interesting question, because clearly consumer trends have changed in the pandemic, and I think a lot of buzzwords and flashwords are going to be flying around. The assumption is that people are stuck in front of their laptops a lot more online shopping. But I guess, could you give me maybe a sort of an insight into the actual secret world of the pandemic, and what's really going on behind the scenes?
This is like my favorite topic. Okay.
Oh,
because the pandemic changed so much, guys, and it was a really good time to be in strategy. One of my favorite insights is actually something that I'm working on for a chip company right now. I'm actually working on it for Bugles. Am I allowed to say that? I don't know. Probably not. But so essentially, one of the main trends that we've seen over the last few years that was really fueled by the pandemic is going from creating ads for our audiences to actually creating storytelling experiences. I'm sure when you realize when Bandersnatch came out from Netflix, like this whole choose your adventure thing really took off. But what happened in the beginning of the pandemic, people got really tired of these really emotional ads that we'll be back and everything's going to be fine. And it kind of ended up being the death of emotional advertising, especially if you combine that trend of the pandemic, plus all the content you see on TikTok and things like that. People don't want ads anymore. They want to be entertained. So something that's really happening right now, all the brands are at the forefront of this, are the ones that are not just doing traditional TVCs. Earlier to your question, Ahmed, why do people still do that? That was pretty called, wasn't it? The the brands that are really nailing it are the ones that are deciding to tell stories. They're the ones who are putting out branded content series. They're actually creating little shows. So that's like a really cool trend that's come up. You briefly mentioned that e-commerce obviously would have gone up. Doesn't seem to be dying down post-pandemic. People have gotten used to the fact of actually shopping online, and they don't intend to go back in store. We've seen that with the Middle East as well, where people just refuse to do that. They'd rather just order everything to their door and then return everything if they don't like it, which is something I've definitely adopted. And lastly, this is something I think a lot of people don't realize, but gaming has really taken off. It is a social platform, and anyone who thinks otherwise hasn't really gamed. Gaming is a social network of its own. And this has spoken to, just like you asked me about how VR and AR are coming into the real world. The pandemic has really fueled how much people game, and brands have really recognized that. They are investing in arenas. They're having people play concerts. They are holding little prides on Animal Crossing. They're doing all sorts of things. So gaming is another space. If you're somebody who likes to play COD, trust me when I say the marketing world is dying to have you. They need people who understand games.
Well, I think Ali Ahmed is our founder, is probably currently logging off and running to his Xbox. But no, I think that's very, very interesting. Sorry to call you out, Ali. Just for the sake of time, rather than giving your view on that question, there's a really interesting question which I know it's come in the chat as opposed to the Q&A. But Mary's asked a really great question, which is, what advice do you have for people who want to bring strategic thinking into their current work in the marketing space? It's something I try to do, but don't feel I know how to go about effectively. And I think given that Shivani's saying, and you're saying, no one actually knows what a strategic thinker actually does. So I think, it's potentially a difficult question. But again, can you just maybe give Mary some of your thoughts on that one? And then I think I'm going to try and do, again, although we're slightly over time, I'm going to try and do another 2 questions. And then I think we'll have to call it there. But if you can just give me your thoughts on that, Saif.
Yeah, no problem. So I think the first thing is understand what's the objective of her current marketing space and what she realistically has influence over. Because we all have big ideas, but if you don't actually have the influence to be able to implement those ideas, then it's pointless coming up with some suggestions. So actually work with people who are receptive to that particular idea, the solution. And then what you need to do is show it in motion first. So prove it can work on a small scale. So that's one thing I think marketing agencies do a lot. So if there's a potential pitch, maybe it's with a big brand, what they'll do is you reach out to that brand, do a small case study demonstration of why that solution works. So you might ask, for us, it might be an influencer, and for a leading brand on a individual basis to show, look, this influencer who's from this particular background talked about your brand, recognize that your competitors actually preferred. Would you like to see the insights? And you've piqued their interest because it's attached to a potential problem that they have. So you need to quickly figure out what is the most important problem that you can help solve. Do you have the influence? If not, demonstrate through an example how you can actually introduce strategy, show it works, and then you've got the buy-in because you've demonstrated that there's value in your solution.
Thank you for that. There's no problem. So I'm going to ask the final 2 questions. I'm going to sort of shove them into one, and then again I'll just get briefly both of your thoughts on them. So one of them is sort of complaining, and again, I'm not in marketing myself, but I can imagine this to be the case. One of them is complaining about there's not a huge amount of vacancies out there. So it's saying, if you want to apply for a company where there's no current vacancies, how would you go about maybe contacting that organization and still getting a role, still getting a job? Again, I don't know if the idea would just be, there's no vacancies, go elsewhere. But again, I'll let you deal with that. And the other one is to say, and again, I alluded to this previously, which was the main thing on somebody's CV is their experience. So, I've only ever worked at KPMG, but I worked there for 5 years. So really my CV says I graduated university, I worked at KPMG, and that's basically what it says. Now, before I graduated, I went to university, and that was basically that. So what experience can one sort of gain without actually having worked in marketing? How can somebody fit in that CV without no internships or any jobs? And again, potentially two difficult questions, but again, maybe Shivani, if you can start off, and then Saif, if you can follow on, please.
Yeah. So the way I did it is I interned. It is one of the easiest ways to get into a company, because what happens in marketing a lot of the time is we always need help, even if there's not a vacancy. Trust me when I say the agency is overloaded. So I came as an intern, and I very quickly found myself in a job, mainly because I made myself sort of indispensable. So even if there aren't any vacancies and there's an agency that you're super passionate about, you can offer to intern. I did one that was an unpaid. Oh, sorry.
So sorry to interrupt. I know, very, very rude of me. But when you say offer to intern, because this is definitely important when it comes to internships, are we going to offer? I mean, are people going to offer their services for free, or are people going to offer?
No. So I think a lot of the time there will be internship roles with people who are looking from graduate schemes. They tend to want to go straight into a job. But when you start off as an intern, you kind of integrate yourself very quickly into a company, because a lot of people need your help. So it's one of the fastest way into doing it. So it's not that I'm saying work for free. No. But don't immediately try. If you're trying to compete with another executive, especially in marketing, you're trying to compete with someone who's been in the industry for 2 years. So don't necessarily, that's not the way I would recommend doing it. If there's an agency that you're really passionate about. So that's number one. I'm sorry, I'm watching Saif move up and down.
Yeah, I was just. Yeah.
I got so distracted. But yeah, so that's the way I did it anyway. I forgot the second part of your question. I'm so sorry. I got a bit.
So sorry. I look like a bat. That's why.
No. So that was. So I think you've answered the question. Just to summarize, I think you've answered the first question very, very succinctly, and I would say exactly the same for the finance world. We're always absolutely overloaded with work, and we always need people. No vacancies doesn't mean that you don't need people. I'm really glad to hear that's the same in the marketing world. To absolutely apply, get in contact with these companies and offer yourselves for an internship, and you'll be taken on. The second question was, you've not had a vacancy, so you're applying to these companies, you're in an interview or whatever, and it's, okay, what experience have you got in marketing? Well, I don't have any.
Okay, the experience question. The most brilliant part of marketing is that you just need to be able to show that you understand, especially if you're working in social media, just show that you understand how to do social media. Okay. I've hired interns that would do the social media for a random like tailor next to them. They would do it for a wine company for their uncle. They just put themselves in there. They tried stuff. And even if it wasn't like, so when you work in marketing, a lot of the tests that you'll do your basic CV and stuff like that. Another thing that you do is an assignment, which will be based on how you understand how social media works. And a lot of the people that have come through that we've actually hired are people who manage social channels, even if it's for a made up brand, for a brand that they actually know through a friend or anything like that. The brand doesn't matter. It's the thinking, it's the effort, it's the enthusiasm that comes through with that. So that's the best part about marketing. You can literally just get into it and give stuff a go. Ooh, there's nothing in the back.
I think that's an amazing answer, and I wish in the finance industry, which I come from, we could have such an ability. I think people potentially who for example want to go into, I don't know, for example, a trading firm, used to be able to show off their own investment portfolio. But I mean, generally, it's very, very difficult. I think it's a really effective and easy answer that if you want to, have something to put on your CV, it can be, I manage the social media, even if you're not getting paid for it, for these several, different entities. And I think that's a really, really great answer. Seth, do you want to sort of, I'll just remind you of both questions. The first one was, how do you go about applying to entities where there's no vacancies available? I think somebody even said, how would I get a job with one of your organization, Creed and Culture, or MIN? And again, you might not be employing people. So again, if somebody contacted you and said, I want to work for you, what would you potentially look for, or would you even take them on? And then the second question was, for someone who doesn't have any experience, what can they do to be able to sort of put on their CV, or to be able to show that they do have experience without actually having worked at an agency before?
So the first question, we definitely have vacancies. Coming back to what Shivani said, I think a lot of marketing agencies are swamped looking for talent and looking for committed talent, I think, as well. Like especially kids, we live in a personal brand world, people who are willing to stick it out, put the company first versus initially understanding where they fit. So definitely loads of roles. I've got my email maybe into the chat, and because you can just contact me and I'll forward it on to whoever and we'll pick it up from there. When it comes to the role itself, I think, Shivani, you're an example, but some of the best team members we have just demonstrated value over time through internships. We've had people even reach out to us saying, I'll do a week for free, do something for free. Will you take me on? And there's an example, I don't know if you guys, have you heard of Steve Butler? He's founder of Social Chain. He's social media personality, he's multimillionaire. And what he had when it comes to his social media organization, I think they had 1,000+ staff. One guy recently reached out to him and said, hey, Steve, I noticed you didn't have a Wikipedia page, so I made one for you. Here you go. And Steve saw it and was like, oh my God, I'm hiring you. It's just spotting opportunities. Like there's a problem. Everyone has problems that they're looking to solve. So you can just spot like what an agency can do better. Maybe even our own website. You might think, oh, this form could be better. Or, like you could write this better. Just go out there and there's people who'll be receptive to you providing that solution. When it comes to the experience thing, I think, just connecting those three things. Shivani, you are an example, right? You told me that you interned, you were willing to commit. When it
oh my God, yeah. I was an intern that thought the agency was mine, like it was my baby. So it was weird attachment issue. I don't know what that was.
So yeah, I think that's it. It's just, be patient as well. Like we live in a world where everything's like got to be rapid, fast. But the reality is life is not like that.
I mean, just to add on to the point you made before, I mean, people really like to talk about themselves a lot. And, I'm in between jobs at the moment. I've done several interviews this week and I've always been told by people who are giving me advice is say to the interviewer, speak about yourself. And the key question, I want to be in your position in 20 years. Can you give me some advice? And all of a sudden you'll see them sort of puff up their shoulders and, speak about themselves for ages and, naturally like you, because again, you're making them feel important. And in terms of making a Wikipedia page for somebody else, what you're doing, you're basically giving importance to them and sort of pushing up their ego a little bit, and making them feel good. I think there's potentially some other questions, but I think again, we'll see how good people are at networking, and maybe some questions can go through LinkedIn and other channels. I just like to sort of briefly advertise GradGurus. We've got several channels ourselves. We have an Instagram page. Our email address is on the PowerPoint slides which we presented. Any one of us in the GradGurus team have got an individual LinkedIn page and are happy to be contacted. Please ask any more questions, follow us for future events. I'd just like to say a really, really big thank you to both Shivani and Saif. I'm not sure whose talk was more interesting, because both times very, very fascinating. So thanks to both for giving the time out, and thanks for everyone for attending. It's a very, very hot day here in the UK as well, in Manchester, where I'm from anyway. So again, fair play to everyone who's taken their time out. And again, we look forward to what's that? Sorry,
it's like 24 degrees.
Well, exactly.
Place, mate.
In the UK, that's barbecue. That's barbecue weather.
45 degrees here, but okay. Anyway, crack on.
So thank you everyone for attending. Please look out for our future events, and please get in contact with us in the meantime with any more questions that you've got. And we'll see you all on the next event. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Take care.